Resuming debate, the honour member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's always a pleasure to rise in this House, and I've always been proud to stand behind my colleague, the member for Calgary-Shepherd, and today it's quite literally I'm standing behind the member for Calgary-Shepherd as I give my speech. Now, after 9 years of this Prime Minister's reckless policies, Canada's border is broken. Drugs, stolen cars, and even terrorists are now evading detection at our border. And this Prime Minister's border incompetence is threatening our international reputation, particularly our reputation with our closest ally and most important trading partner. One example of this Prime Minister's recklessness in the past was his infamous Welcome to Canada tweet, which led to a large influx of irregular migrants who came through Roxham Road for years. And this was a problem that took this Liberal government years to get under control, and it's a problem, a broad problem, of which the consequences we still face today. Now, one of the largest beneficiaries of the Prime Minister's policies on crime have been organized crime linked to drugs, stolen cars, and terrorism. Organized criminals are specifically targeting Canada because it is a low-risk, high-reward environment. We've heard this consistently at the Public Safety Committee in relation to the issue of auto thefts. Criminals will look around the world to find the path of least resistance, and Canada's policies have made it far easier. Canada's policies under this Liberal government have made it far easier for organized crime to take root in our country. Let's just look at this government's bail policies. Their bail policies, their lax border policies, their criminal justice policies, their inattention to our border have led to organized crime taking root in our country. We know that Canada has become a manufacturing hub for the deadly fentanyl drug, and the strict border provisions that were introduced during the pandemic saw the Canadian fentanyl market shift from being an importer of fentanyl to becoming a massive domestic producer of fentanyl. Now, CSIS has found that, quote, synthetic drugs are increasingly being produced in Canada using precursor chemicals that were largely sourced from China. That's their quote. 80% of the chemicals used in fentanyl production are completely unregulated, meaning that criminals can easily import them from China. We know that there are over 350 organized crime groups that are actively involved in our domestic fentanyl market. And CBC has even reported that violent cartels are attempting to establish a foothold in Western Canada. We need to stop the deadly flow of drugs coming into our country and the deadly flow of drugs leaving our country. It has become an international embarrassment that our country is now being seen as a drug provider for the world. Now, in fiscal year 2022, the Canada Border Services Agency claims that they intercepted a total of 563 grams of fentanyl all year, throughout the year, leaving Canada. But in just one shipment, the Australian Border Services intercepted 11,000 grams of pure powdered fentanyl entering from a shipment that came from Canada. So CBSA has caught 563 grams in all of fiscal year 2022, and yet in just one shipment, the Australians intercepted 11,000 grams coming from Canada. Now, the Vancouver Police Department has reported that approximately 50% of all hydromorphone seizures, now hydromorphone is that drug that this Liberal government has funded with taxpayer dollars as the so-called threat reduction measure, and that these hydromorphone, they're seizing these hydromorphone supplies that are being diverted from the government's so-called safe supply program for hard drugs. Now, on July 15th, the chief of the London Police Services stated, quote, diverted so-called safe supplies being resold into our community. It's being trafficked into other communities, and it's being used as a currency in exchange for fentanyl products fueling the drug trade. Now, this Prime Minister's reckless drug experiments are now threatening our closest trading relationship. In the 12 months up to September 2024, the U.S. border agents seized 11,600 pounds of drugs entering the United States from Canada. Now, there are some that might say, you shouldn't be talking about this issue. It's making us look worse. But we cannot deal with the problem until we acknowledge the problem. And when we acknowledge the problem, we can finally take action on solving the problem. The United States is not going to be satisfied with our silence on this issue. They will be satisfied when we take action on this issue. Now, the seizures of fentanyl doses have more than tripled from 2023 and 2024, rising from 239,000 doses to 839,000 doses. In fact, in Langley in British Columbia, there was a recent lab bust of a mega lab, and there was enough fentanyl that was captured at this lab to kill 90 million people. That's more than 2 times the population of Canada. And this is just at one drug lab that was busted in British Columbia. We must fix this. This is costing Canadians their lives. And we must fix this not just because it's a threat to our trading relationship with our closest trading partner, but we must fix this because we need to save Canadian lives, and we need to save the lives of all the people who are suffering around the world from these drugs that are leaving Canada. Under this Prime Minister, 47,000 Canadians have died from drug overdoses. That's more people than we lost in the Second World War. And it represents a 200% annual increase in drug overdoses deaths after this Prime Minister's radical drug experiments. Drugs, crime, disorder, and a broken border. And sadly, it's a consequence of this Liberal government's radical policies, and it threatens our relationships with our closest partners. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, there's been a 632% increase in U.S. Border Patrol encounters with people illegally attempting to enter the United States from Canada. Terrorist screening data shows that in 2023, there was 484 matches on a U.S. terrorist watch list at land ports of entry along the Canada-U.S. border. Since 2017, these numbers have gone up 123%. These are individuals that are known to the U.S. government for their links with terrorist organizations. And the only reason that they were apprehended was because they attempted to enter the United States. And just this summer, we saw that 3 ISIS fighters operating on Canadian soil were apprehended just before they were about to carry out attacks on innocent civilians, both here and in the United States. Responsibility for this broken border lies squarely on the feet of this Liberal government. The brave men and women of the CBSA do not have the resources and support to do the job that they need to do. The previous Conservative government increased the budget of CBSA by 45% from 2006 to 2015. There are 26% more personnel at our border from 2006 to 2015, and there were a total of 1,000 more full-time equivalents from 2006 to 2015, and we'll never apologize for our Conservative record. Canada has the largest undefended border in the world, and it's a beautiful thing that we could have a border with our closest trading partner that's open. I know there are so many strong relations we have over the border, strong trading relationships that we need, and the fact that we've had this for so many decades is a wonderful thing. But this Liberal government has taken that for granted, and they have underfunded our border, and we've seen a rise in crime in this country because of their radical criminal policies, because of their radical drug liberalization policies, and now we see that border that we have, that privilege that we have as a country is coming under threat under the new U.S. administration. We cannot take it for granted. It is an existential crisis. I have farmers in my riding who are texting me, talking about the stress that they're going under, and we know that farmers do face a lot of mental health challenges. They have to face drought, they have to face a volatile commodities market, and now they're facing the threat of a 25% tariff from the U.S. administration. We can't afford this Liberal government to take our trading relationship and our borders for granted anymore. We need them to take strong action to ensure our safety, ensure the safety of our allies, and also to ensure our economic opportunities are kept. Now, we had the CBSA union at the Public Safety Committee, and they said that Canada's ability to prevent smuggling is lacking, and its capacity to gather reliable and sound data about smuggling is also inadequate. Now, the CBSA union said there is almost a 0% chance that any illegal weapon entering the country via rail will ever be found. Madam Speaker, we know that the vast majority of gun violence in Canada is committed with illegally smuggled firearms coming in from the United States. Now, last week, we saw that this Liberal government continued its attack on law-abiding, responsible, licensed firearms owners. This Prime Minister is so desperate to distract from his miserable record, a 116% increase in gun violence since he took office in 2015. Now, rather than wasting this money on this flawed confiscation scheme that will only affect legal, law-abiding, licensed gun owners, maybe they should be spending that money on the border, increasing the confidence of our trading partners that we're actually taking action on the drug trade, on illegal people crossing over the borders. That's the kind of action that our trading partners want to see, and yet what these Liberals want to do is just play divisive politics. A Conservative government will fix our broken border, will increase border patrols, will work with provincial law enforcement, will tighten visa rules, will crack down on illegal drug production, will secure our ports with increased boots on the ground, and expand the mandate of the CBSA so they can do the job that we need them to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Brilliant.
Questions and comments? Order. Not sure what the honourable has been eating, but he had a healthy breakfast, I think, this morning. The honourable member for the honourable parliamentary secretary, the government house leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Simply amazing in terms of how it is a Conservative member can actually stand up and try to give a false narrative as if the Conservative government under Stephen Harper did anything to make Canada's borders anything but secure, Madam Speaker. In fact, not only did they divest in terms of real people at the borders, they also had cuts. Contrast that to over $1 billion since what, 2018, I believe it is, Madam Speaker. Let me get the actual date here. Since 2018, an investment of nearly $1.5 billion to strengthen Canada's border controls. There's a litany of information that the members opposite, no doubt, will put on the record, which is just not true. My question is, why should Canadians believe the Conservative Party, in particular this leader, when he's absolutely the opposite of the types of things in which he preaches today?
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the member should have just stopped at amazing, because that's really what I took from his comments there. But I will say that the proof is really in the pudding, is that obviously things were not perfect before 2015, but they certainly weren't the disaster that we see today under this Liberal government. I just quoted a litany of statistics about how bad things have gotten, and now we're seeing an incoming U.S. administration that wants to penalize Canada for taking the border and our trading relationship for granted. You know, Canadians can see very clearly, and it's been reflected in the numbers that we're seeing out there, that they no longer believe this Liberal government, and that they want a Conservative government to come in and clean up the mess that they made.
Yeah. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
It's important for Canadians to know that the Conservatives have erased their own Opposition Day motion in order to amplify falsehoods from Donald Trump. There was a time when, if Canadians were threatened by a foreign power, Canadians stood up with backbone, but not under this pusillanimous and predatory member who lives in Stornoway. So Donald Trump threatens 25% tariffs. They say, damn straight, let's do that, and claim falsely that our border is leaking fentanyl. And why is it all leaking fentanyl? Well, they claim it's because the leader of Canada created a fentanyl crisis. They will say anything, do anything to burn our house to the ground. But what they won't talk about are the thousands of CBSA employees that Stephen Harper fired when Pierre Fortin, who was the national president of Customs, called out the Conservatives, and he said, more child pornography entering the country, more weapons, illegal drugs that will pass through our borders, not to mention terrorists and sexual predators and hardened criminals. That's the Conservative record, but they don't give a damn, because if it's about burning this house to the ground to get to the Prime Minister, they will burn the country to the ground and inflict 25% tariffs on us while imitating anything Donald Trump says. They are sock puppets and traitors. That's right.
Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, I think that language is very unparliamentary, that any member would accuse another honourable member of being a traitor to our country. Yeah. That member from Timmins James Bay is simply putting his head in the sand when he tries to claim that there is not a fentanyl issue in our country. We know that our ally Australia is Australia's fentanyl supply. The majority of it is coming from Canada. We cannot ignore this fact. We need to take action to save Australian lives, to save Canadian lives, to save American lives, and to save our borders with the other country. And by trying to just ignore that fact is not taking responsibility on behalf of Canadians. And taking responsibility on behalf of Canadians means looking at it squarely in the eye and taking action on the real issues and not burying our head in the sand like that NDP member.
And comments. A brief question. The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As an initial catalyst to the current extreme and growing drug crisis Canada is facing at its borders, this government removed mandatory minimum penalties for drug dealers. How incredibly inappropriate is it for this government to signal more leniency on drug dealers right now? With premeditation, they are benefiting more than ever from the addiction and death of Canadians.
From the honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for that question. We know that when mandatory minimum penalties are removed, that the frequency of criminals who are repeat criminals, like these aren't just people that commit one crime and get rehabilitated, but the instance of repeat criminals increases on our street. And when I talk to law enforcement, they tell me it's the same people they're apprehending over and over and over again. We need tough penalties to get tough on the drug dealers who are peddling death in our communities. We can no longer let this Liberal government stand idly by and let that happen. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Have a point of order. The honourable member for... Oh, yes. Sorry, it's the honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake. Oh, sorry. Simcoe North, sorry. Just one seat over.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was just curious, is it parliamentary language to use the word or claim that someone is a traitor in this House? I'm just looking for clarification on the rules and bounds.
Did not indicate a specific person was a traitor. He didn't say it was a specific individual. However, the word is raising an issue, and I would just ask members to please be judicial in the words that they use in the House.